Good morning. Here is today's Korean economic news briefing. We begin with a major policy announcement from Deputy Prime Minister Koo Yoon-chul, who is currently attending the G20 Finance Ministers meeting and the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C. Deputy Prime Minister Koo outlined an ambitious vision to position Korea as a global artificial intelligence hub. According to his statements, 6 United Nations organizations, along with the Inter-American Development Bank and the Asian Development Bank, have agreed to establish AI hubs in Korea. Koo emphasized that this represents the first step toward an even more ambitious long-term goal, potentially bringing the UN's AI headquarters to Korean soil. This strategic initiative reflects the government's conviction that Korea can become a leading player in the global AI landscape. In a related development that demonstrates Korea's commitment to strategic international partnerships, Deputy Prime Minister Koo announced the establishment of the Korea-US Strategic Investment Corporation, which will be headquartered in Seoung City and officially launch on June 18. This new entity will serve as a control tower for managing investments to the United States and represents a significant shift in how Korea manages public institutional assets. The decision to place the headquarters in Seoung, rather than Seoul, reflects the government's commitment to balanced regional development and reducing the concentration of economic activities in the capital area. Regarding artificial intelligence technology strategy, the government has made a clear decision to support small language models, or SLMs, rather than pursuing large language models, which the government views as having limited prospects. This reflects a more pragmatic, focused approach to Korea's AI development strategy that prioritizes practical applications and Korean language capabilities. On the macroeconomic front, Deputy Prime Minister Koo expressed optimism about Korea's growth prospects, stating that the nation can achieve growth exceeding 2.0% this year. However, he also acknowledged the persistent challenges facing the economy, including concerns about inflation and currency volatility. Koo noted that while inflation concerns exist, the government and the Bank of Korea will respond flexibly to economic conditions as they evolve. He also indicated that discussions about additional supplementary budgets are premature at this stage. The Deputy Prime Minister will hold bilateral talks with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on April 17. These discussions are expected to cover various economic matters including currency exchange rates, major investment flows to the United States, and broader macroeconomic cooperation. The timing of these talks is significant given current global economic uncertainties, particularly concerning Middle East tensions and trade policy developments. Turning to domestic economic conditions, employment data shows continued strength. In March, the number of employed persons increased by 206,000, marking the second consecutive month with increases exceeding 200,000. The unemployment rate improved to 3.0%, declining by 0.1 percentage point from the previous month. These positive labor market indicators suggest underlying economic resilience despite broader headwinds. However, the government has expressed concerns about the broader economic environment. Officials noted that the Middle East conflict is expanding the burden on consumer prices and household finances, while also increasing downside risks to economic growth. They pointed to several challenges facing households, including high inflation rates that people actually experience, elevated loan interest rates, and limited improvements in real wages. These factors together suggest that consumer spending may struggle to provide sufficient momentum for sustained economic growth. Regarding the impact of Middle East tensions on prices, data from Gyeongbuk Province indicates that consumer prices remain relatively stable. Among 9 major agricultural and livestock products, only rice, chicken, and potatoes have posted increases since February, rising by 1.3, 1.7, and 12.5% respectively. Notably, most categories actually saw price declines, including beef, pork, eggs, and vegetables. Public utility rates in the province have also remained stable, with most local governments maintaining a price freeze since the previous year. In financial market developments, the Kospi index closed down 34.13 points, or 0.55%, at 6,191.92. The index opened higher, tracking overnight strength on Wall Street, but quickly reversed direction. The KOSDAQ index moved in the opposite direction, posting gains. The Korean won depreciated against the US dollar, closing at 1,483 won and 50 jeon per dollar, up 8 won and 90 jeon from the previous session. These market movements reflect ongoing investor caution regarding the Middle East situation and expectations for US economic policy. Notably, liquidity has begun to build in the Korean market. Outstanding funds awaiting investment opportunities in the stock market and surrounding assets now total 635 trillion won, while ETF net assets have reached 408 trillion won. These figures suggest that investors are sitting on substantial dry powder, waiting for more clarity on global economic conditions before committing capital. In the industrial sector, Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy Kim Young-kwon visited the central region to inspect battery and display manufacturing capabilities. During breakfast meetings with major companies including Samsung SDI, LG Energy Solution, SK On, Samsung Display, and others, the minister reviewed the current state of these critical industries and identified challenges facing manufacturers. The focus was on expanding manufacturing AI transformation, or MX, across industrial complexes as a means to enhance competitiveness in increasingly challenging global markets. The battery industry faces particular pressures from regulatory developments in the United States. Major Korean battery manufacturers including LG Energy Solution and SK On have submitted position papers to the U.S. Trade Representative's office, expressing concerns about potential trade restrictions. Simultaneously, Trade Law Section 301 investigations are underway, creating additional uncertainty for Korea's manufacturing sector broadly. In a positive development for Korean green technology, Lemon, a Korean company, has successfully exported products using alternative technology to replace PFAS, which has been banned by the European Union. This represents successful adaptation to evolving global environmental regulations in sectors ranging from waterproof clothing to semiconductor manufacturing and electric vehicle battery efficiency improvements. Real estate market developments show interesting divergences. During spring moving season, the market is experiencing increased subscription activity for new apartment sales, with next week seeing supply of approximately 8,400 units nationwide. However, a clear polarization pattern is emerging in buyer preferences. Apartments in transit-oriented locations, meaning areas with convenient access to public transportation and developed surrounding infrastructure, are showing strong demand with high competition, while other locations are struggling with relatively weaker performance. In international economic news, the U.S. Federal Reserve's Beige Book, released prior to next week's scheduled Federal Open Market Committee meeting, noted that businesses are adopting a wait-and-see stance regarding the Middle East uncertainty. Nonetheless, broader American economic growth continues. Regarding monetary policy, Treasury Secretary Bessent stated that the Fed may have misjudged inflation dynamics and suggested that base rates could be reduced more substantially. He noted that excluding energy and food prices, core inflation is actually declining, creating room for more aggressive rate cuts. The S&P 500 index has continued to reach new highs, driven primarily by technology stocks. The Nasdaq Composite Index has similarly set new record levels. These developments suggest that major American corporations continue to demonstrate strong earnings performance, which has outweighed concerns related to Middle East tensions and trade policy uncertainties. For Korean investors and workers, several implications emerge from today's economic news. First, the government's ambitious AI Hub initiative could create significant new employment opportunities and attract foreign investment. Second, the Korea-U.S. Strategic Investment Corporation represents enhanced institutional capacity for international economic engagement. Third, the relatively stable domestic prices, combined with solid employment growth, suggest the economy is navigating current challenges reasonably well. However, the persistent pressures on household finances from high inflation expectations and elevated borrowing costs warrant continued monitoring. Finally, global investors should watch upcoming U.S.-Iran peace negotiations, Treasury Secretary Bessent's bilateral meetings with Korean officials, and the Federal Reserve's policy decisions for signals regarding future global economic conditions and asset valuations. This concludes today's Korean Economic News Briefing.